Sam was 12 years old when his whole life changed forever. And it all started with a rabbit. He lived in a small village called Fernhill, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened, where the biggest news of the week was old Mrs. Barlow losing her cat again, or the bakery running out of bread on a Sunday morning. Sam had spent every single one of his 12 years waiting for something, anything, to break the silence of his boring little world. His mother worked at the village school, and his father fixed things around town, broken fences, leaking roofs, squeaky doors, and Sam was expected to help after school, carrying tools and holding ladders and pretending he was interested in the difference between a flathead and a crosshead screwdriver. But Sam was not interested in screwdrivers at all. What Sam loved more than anything was the forest. It sat at the edge of Fernhill like a dark green wall, stretching out in every direction, full of twisted old oaks and birch trees with white bark that peeled like paper. The villagers called it witchwood, and most of them stayed away from it because of the stories. Old tales about strange lights flickering between the trunks at night, about sounds that had no source, about people who wandered in too deep and came back confused, unable to remember where they had been or how long they had been gone. Sam did not believe in those stories. He went into the forest nearly every day after school, following the narrow trails that wound between the trees, climbing over fallen logs, watching squirrels chase each other through the branches above. He had mapped out every path he could find, drawn them carefully in a notebook he kept hidden under his bed, and he felt like he knew Witchwood better than anyone alive. So on that Tuesday afternoon in late October, when the sky was gray and the air was sharp with the smell of dead leaves, Sam noticed something he had never seen before, and it stopped him cold in his tracks. A rabbit sat in the middle of the path ahead of him. Not unusual by itself, since the forest was full of rabbits. But this one did not run away when it saw him. It sat perfectly still and stared at him with dark, round eyes. And there was something about the way it looked at him that made Sam feel strange, like the rabbit was waiting for him on purpose. He took a step forward, and the rabbit turned and bolted off the path into the thick undergrowth to the left. Sam followed it without thinking. He pushed through ferns and brambles, ducking under low branches, scratching his arms on thorns, trying to keep up with the flash of brown fur darting ahead of him. The rabbit was fast, but it seemed to pause every few seconds, almost like it was making sure Sam was still behind it. After a few minutes of crashing through the undergrowth, Sam stumbled into a clearing he had never found before. He stopped and caught his breath, looking around in surprise. The clearing was small and round, surrounded by a ring of enormous oak trees that were much older and thicker than any others in the forest. Their roots spread across the ground like the fingers of giant hands, twisting and nodding over each other in every direction. And right in the center of the clearing, where the roots came together in a great tangled mass, there was something that made Sam's heart beat faster. A door. It was made of dark wood, almost black, set into the ground at an angle between the roots, like the entrance to a cellar. It had iron hinges that were orange with rust, and a heavy iron ring for a handle. And it was covered in moss and dead leaves, as though it had been there for 100 years, without anyone touching it. The rabbit was gone. Sam stood at the edge of the clearing for a long time, staring at the door. His hands were trembling slightly, and his mind was racing with questions. Who had built a door in the middle of the forest? And where did it lead? And why had nobody ever mentioned it before? He walked slowly to the center of the clearing and knelt beside the door. He brushed away the leaves and moss with his fingers and found strange markings carved into the wood, symbols he did not recognize, curves and spirals, and shapes that looked almost like letters from an alphabet he had never seen. Sam reached out and grabbed the iron ring. It was ice cold, even through the skin of his hand. And for a second, he thought about letting go and walking away and forgetting he had ever found this place. But he was Sam. And Sam had been waiting his whole life for something like this. And he was not going to walk away now. He pulled. The door was heavy, but it moved, groaning on its ancient hinges. And a rush of cold air came up from below, carrying a smell that was strange but not unpleasant, like wet stone and old earth and something else, something sweet that he could not name. Below the door there was a staircase. The steps were carved from stone, rough and uneven, leading down into darkness. Sam could see about 10 steps before the light from above faded and everything below became black. He sat on the edge and looked down into the dark for a long time. He did not have a torch with him, and the smart thing would have been to go home and come back the next day with proper supplies. A flashlight, a rope, maybe a snack. But Sam's curiosity was like a living thing inside him, pulling him forward, whispering that if he left now, he might never find this place again, that the door might be gone tomorrow, that this was his one chance. So he stood up, took a deep breath, and started walking down the stone steps into the darkness. The air grew colder with every step, and the light from above grew dimmer and dimmer until he was moving through near total blackness, one hand on the rough stone wall beside him, feeling his way forward. The steps went down and down and down, much further than he expected, and just when he was starting to think he had made a terrible mistake, he saw something below him. Light. It was faint and blue, glowing softly from somewhere ahead, and it gave Sam enough hope to keep going. The staircase leveled out into a narrow tunnel with walls of packed earth and stone, and the blue light grew brighter as he walked, until he turned a corner and gasped. He was standing at the entrance to an enormous underground cavern, so vast that he could not see the far wall. The ceiling soared above him like the inside of a cathedral, covered in thousands of tiny glowing crystals that gave off the soft blue light he had been following, turning everything below into a world of pale blue shadows. And down below, spread across the floor of the cavern, was a city. Small stone buildings with round rooftops lined narrow cobblestone streets. There were bridges arching over a dark river that wound through the center, and lanterns hanging from iron posts that gave off warm golden light, and gardens filled with plants that glow in colors Sam had never seen before. Deep purple, bright silver, a green so vivid it almost hurt to look at. It was the most beautiful thing Sam had ever seen, and he stood there with his mouth open, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything except stare. And then a voice behind him said, "You should not be here." Sam spun around and found himself face to face with a girl. She was about his age, maybe a year older, with pale skin and dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were large and gray and looked almost silver in the blue light, and she was wearing clothes that seemed to be made from some kind of woven plant material, a long tunic and leggings the color of bark. She was staring at him with an expression that was half fear and half anger. "Who are you?" Sam asked, his voice cracking slightly. "The better question," the girl said, "is who are you, and how did you find the door?" Sam opened his mouth to answer, but found that he had no idea what to say, because the truth was that a rabbit had led him here, and saying that out loud would make him sound completely insane. The girl narrowed her eyes and looked him up and down, as if she was deciding something important. "Come with me," she finally said, and turned and walked toward the glowing city below. Sam hesitated for only a second before he followed her, because at that point, turning back was simply not an option anymore. The girl walked fast, and Sam had to jog to keep up with her as they made their way down a steep path carved into the cavern wall. The stone beneath his feet was smooth and polished, worn down by what must have been thousands of years of footsteps. and as they descended, the city below grew larger and more detailed, revealing itself layer by layer, like a painting being slowly uncovered. "What is this place?" Sam asked, but the girl did not answer him. "Who are you?" he tried again. She glanced back at him with those strange silver eyes and said, "My name is Ren, and I will explain everything once we are somewhere safe. So stop asking questions and keep walking." Sam did not like being told to stop asking questions, but he also did not want to annoy the only person he had met in this underground world, so he shut his mouth and followed her in silence. They reached the bottom of the path and stepped onto a cobblestone street, and Sam immediately felt like he had walked into a dream. The buildings on either side were made of pale gray stone, carved with the same spiraling symbols he had seen on the door above. They were small and rounded, with oval windows that glowed with warm light from inside, and their doors were painted in deep rich colors: midnight blue, forest green, a red so dark it was almost black. Ivy with silver leaves climbed the walls, and from somewhere nearby, Sam could hear the sound of running water, and of faint music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The streets were mostly empty, but Sam caught glimpses of people, or at least he thought they were people, moving in the shadows between buildings. They were thin and pale, like Ren, and they wore the same kind of woven clothing, and every single one of them stopped to stare at Sam as he passed, their eyes wide with something that looked like shock. "They have never seen a surface dweller before," Ren said quietly, without looking back. "A what?" "A person from above, from the surface world. That is what we call your kind. Most of us have never met one, and some did not even believe you existed anymore." Sam felt a strange chill run through him that had nothing to do with the cold underground air. Ren led him through a maze of narrow streets, past a market square where stalls displayed strange fruits and vegetables that glowed faintly in the blue light, past a fountain where the water ran upward instead of downward. Sam stopped and stared at that for so long that Ren had to come back and grab his arm to pull him along, and finally to a small building at the end of a quiet lane, tucked between two larger structures, like a secret hiding between two shoulders. She opened the door and pushed him inside. The room was warm and lit by a cluster of the glowing crystals hanging from the ceiling in a kind of chandelier. There was a low wooden table, cushions on the floor instead of chairs, and shelves lining every wall, filled with books and jars and objects Sam could not identify. "Sit," Ren said, pointing to one of the cushions. Sam sat. Ren closed the door and stood with her back against it, her arms crossed, studying him with an intensity that made Sam feel like a bug under a magnifying glass. "The door was supposed to be sealed," she said, almost to herself. "It has been sealed for over 200 years. No one from above has come down here since the Great Closing. So either the seal has broken on its own, which would be very bad, or someone broke it on purpose, which would be worse." "I just found it in the forest," Sam said. "A rabbit led me to it." Ren's expression changed immediately. Her eyes went wide and her mouth fell open, and she took a quick step forward. "A rabbit?" "Yes, a brown rabbit. It was sitting on the path, and it stared at me, and then ran into the bushes, and I followed it to a clearing, and that is where I found the door. Is that important?" Ren sat down on the cushion across from him and put her hands flat on the table, and Sam noticed they were trembling. "The rabbit is a guide," she said. "It is something very old and very rare. The guides were creatures that used to lead chosen people between our world and yours, back before the Great Closing, back when the two worlds were connected. But they disappeared centuries ago, and the fact that one appeared to you means something I am not sure I want to think about. What does it mean?" Ren took a long breath and let it out slowly. "It means that something terrible is coming, and the forest has chosen you to help us stop it." Sam stared at her. He waited for her to smile or laugh or tell him she was joking, but her face was completely serious, and the trembling in her hands had not stopped. I think you should start from the beginning, he said. And so Ren told him the story of the world beneath his feet. Long ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the surface world and the underground world had been connected. The people who lived below the earth called themselves the root folk, because they lived among the roots of the great trees, and they had a special bond with the forest above them. The trees fed them with energy from the sun, and in return the root folk cared for the roots, keeping them healthy and strong. And this was the way things had worked for longer than anyone could remember. But then something went wrong. A darkness began to grow in the deepest parts of the underground world, far below the caverns where the root folk lived. It was not a creature or a person. It was more like a disease, a creeping rot that infected the stone and the earth and the water, turning everything it touched gray and lifeless. The root folk called it the Hollow, because wherever it spread, it left nothing behind, just empty, hollow darkness. The root folk fought the Hollow for many years, but they could not destroy it, only push it back. And as the fight went on, they became afraid that the Hollow would find its way to the surface and destroy the forest and everything above it. So they made a terrible decision. They sealed the doors. Every entrance between the underground world and the surface was closed and locked with powerful barriers that no one could break. And the root folk cut themselves off from the world above, trapping themselves below with the Hollow in order to protect the surface from its spread. For 200 years they had held the Hollow at bay, living in their underground cities, growing weaker and more isolated with every generation, slowly losing touch with the forest above that had once given them strength. But now, Ren said, and her voice was barely a whisper, the Hollow is growing again, faster than ever before, and our barriers are failing, and we cannot hold it back much longer. Sam felt the weight of her words settle on him like a heavy blanket. Think I can help? He asked. The guide chose you, Ren said. In the old stories, the guides never appeared without a reason. They chose people who had a role to play, people who could do things that the root folk could not. I do not know what you are supposed to do, but the guide brought you here for a purpose. But I am just a kid from Fernhill, Sam said. I fix fences with my dad, and I'm not even very good at that. I do not know anything about fighting darkness or saving underground worlds. Ren gave him a look that was almost a smile. Nobody ever does, she said. That is the way it works in all the old stories. The hero never thinks he is a hero until he has no choice but to become one. Before Sam could respond to that, a loud knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps that made both of them jump. Ren stood quickly and opened the door, and a tall, thin man stepped inside. He was old, much older than anyone Sam had seen so far, with a long face and deep lines around his eyes. And his hair was completely white, falling to his shoulders like threads of silk. He wore a dark green robe and carried a wooden staff that was carved with spiraling symbols, and he looked at Sam with an expression that was impossible to read. So it is true, the old man said. A surface dweller has come through the door. Elder Cade, Ren said, and Sam noticed a new nervousness in her voice. The door seal was broken, and a guide brought him here. I found him at the top of the eastern stair, and I brought him here to keep him hidden until I could. You did well, the old man interrupted gently. He walked slowly across the room and sat down on the cushion beside Sam, moving stiffly like someone whose bones hurt with every motion. Up close, Sam could see that his silver eyes, the same shade as Ren's, were clouded with age, but they still had a sharpness to them that made Sam sit up straighter. What is your name, boy? Elder Cade asked. Sam. Sam, the old man repeated, as if tasting the word. Well, Sam, you have arrived at a very dangerous time, and I am afraid that you cannot simply go back the way you came. Why not? Because the seal that was broken to let you in has now been broken for everything else as well. and the hollow will have felt the opening. It will be moving toward it even now, trying to find a way through to the surface. And if it reaches the door before we can seal it again, your world and ours will both be lost. Sam felt his stomach drop. Then seal it again, he said. Close the door and lock it like before. Elder Cade shook his head slowly. The old seals took hundreds of us working together. Now we are few and weak, and the knowledge of how to create such seals has been mostly forgotten. He paused and looked at Sam with those sharp, clouded eyes. But there is another way, a way that was spoken of in the oldest stories, and it requires something that we do not have. What is it? Sam asked. Sunlight, Elder Cade said. The hollow is darkness in its purest form, and the one thing that can destroy it completely is pure sunlight brought down from the surface. But it cannot be just any light. It must be carried by someone the forest has chosen, someone a guide has led through the door. The old man reached out and placed his hand on Sam's shoulder, and his grip was surprisingly strong. It must be carried by you. Sam did not sleep that night, though Wren gave him a small room at the back of her house, with a bed made from soft moss and woven blankets that smelled like cedar. He lay in the blue-lit darkness, staring at the crystal ceiling above him, turning Elder Cade's words over and over in his mind, like stones in a tumbling river. Carry sunlight underground to destroy the hollow. It sounded like something from a fairy tale, not like something a 12-year-old boy from Fernhill was supposed to actually do. But the fear in Wren's eyes had been real, and the trembling in Elder Cade's voice had been real, and the cold, strange air of this underground world pressing against Sam's skin was very, very real. By morning, or what passed for morning down here, since there was no sun to mark the time, only a slow brightening of the crystals overhead that mimicked the rhythm of day and night. Sam had made his decision. He would help, not because he felt brave, because he did not. Not because he believed he was some kind of chosen hero, because that still sounded ridiculous to him, but because the door was open, and the hollow was coming, and if he walked away and something terrible happened to these people, and to the forest he loved, he would never be able to live with himself. Wren was waiting for him when he came out of the room, sitting at the low table with 2 cups of something warm and steaming. It is root tea, she said, pushing one of the cups toward him. It tastes strange at first, but you will get used to it. Sam took a sip and nearly choked. It tasted like dirt mixed with honey and something peppery that burned the back of his throat. But he swallowed it and nodded politely, and Wren gave him that almost smile again. Elder Cade wants to see us, she said. He has gathered the council, and they want to meet you. The council? The leaders of the root folk. There are 5 of them, and they make all the decisions for our people. They are very old and very wise, and some of them are very stubborn, so do not expect them all to be happy about your being here. She was right about that. The council met in a round chamber at the center of the city, a grand hall built from smooth white stone, with a dome ceiling covered in the brightest crystals Sam had seen yet. The light in here was almost golden, and it reminded him of late afternoon sunlight filtering through autumn leaves, which made his chest ache with a sudden sharp homesickness. 5 elders sat in a semicircle on high-backed stone chairs, and Elder Cade was in the center. The other 4 looked at Sam with expressions ranging from curious to suspicious to outright hostile. The one who looked most hostile was a woman named Elder Marin. She was thin and hard, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like chips of gray ice, and she spoke before anyone else could. "This is the surface dweller," she said, and the way she said surface dweller made it sound like an insult. "A child? This is what the guide has brought us? We are facing the end of our world, and the forest sends us a child?" "That's the forest does not make mistakes," Elder Cade said calmly. The forest has not spoken to us in 200 years, Elder Marin shot back. How do we know this is not a trick of the hollow itself, a way to distract us while it pushes through our defenses? A murmur went through the other elders, and Sam could see doubt spreading across their faces like a shadow. I am not a trick, Sam said, and his voice came out louder than he intended, echoing off the stone walls. Every eye in the room turned to him, and he felt his face flush hot, but he did not look away. I do not know why the rabbit led me here, and I do not know if I can do what you need me to do. But I am here, and I am willing to try, and if you have a better plan, then I am happy to hear it. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Elder Cade laughed, a dry, quiet laugh that crinkled the lines around his eyes, and he looked at the other elders with something close to satisfaction. He has spirit, Cade said. That is more than I can say for most of us lately. Elder Marin was not amused, but she did not argue further, and after a long discussion that went back and forth for what felt like hours, the council agreed to let Sam attempt the task. The plan was this. Sam would travel back to the surface through the broken door, and there he would need to find a heartstone, a special crystal that the root folk had once used to channel energy between the surface and the underground. The heartstones had been hidden throughout the forest before the great closing, buried in secret places that only the guides knew how to find. If Sam could find a heartstone and hold it up to direct sunlight at exactly midday when the sun was at its strongest, the crystal would absorb the light and hold it, and then Sam could bring it back underground and carry it to the source of the hollow, deep in the caverns below the city, and release the trapped sunlight to destroy the darkness once and for all. It sounds simple when you say it like that, Sam said. It is not simple at all, Elder Cade replied. The journey to the source of the hollow is long and dangerous, and the hollow knows when someone is carrying light. It will try to stop you. How? The hollow cannot take a physical form, but it can reach into your mind. It feeds on fear and doubt and despair, and it will try to fill you with those feelings until you give up and let go of the light. Many of our bravest warriors have tried to carry light into the deep caverns over the years, and none of them have come back. Sam swallowed hard. That is not very encouraging, he said. No, Elder Cade agreed. But the warriors who tried before were root folk, and they had lived their whole lives underground, surrounded by the hollow's influence. You are different. You come from the surface, from the world of open sky and real sunlight, and you carry something inside you that we do not. What is that? Memory, the old man said. The memory of warmth and light and open air, real sunlight on your face, real wind in your hair, real grass under your feet. Those memories are a kind of armor against the hollow, because the hollow cannot touch what it has never known. Ren stepped forward then and said something that surprised everyone in the room. I am going with him. Elder Marin stood up so fast her chair scraped against the stone floor. Absolutely not. You are the youngest member of the Root Guard, and we need every fighter we have to hold the barriers while... If he goes alone, he will get lost before he reaches the first tunnel, Ren said, and her voice was steady and firm in a way that made Sam realize she had already thought this through. He does not know the paths, he does not know the dangers, and he does not know how to navigate the deep caverns. Without a guide, he will fail before he starts. She is right, Elder Cade said quietly. The argument lasted another hour, but in the end, Ren won, mostly because nobody could argue with her logic, and also because nobody else volunteered to go. The rest of the day was spent preparing for the journey. Ren took Sam through the city to gather supplies, food that would last, water skins, a pair of light crystals that could be carried in their pockets for illumination, and a map drawn on thin leather that showed the main tunnels leading down to the deep caverns. As they walked through the narrow streets, Sam began to see more of the root folks' world, and despite the danger hanging over everything, he found himself amazed by what he saw. There were workshops where craftspeople carved beautiful objects from stone and crystal, shaping them with tools that hummed with a strange energy. There were gardens, underground gardens, where plants grew in soil enriched by the roots of the great trees above, fed by the blue crystal light. There were children playing in a small square, tossing a ball that glowed like a tiny moon, and they stopped to stare at Sam with huge, curious eyes, before their mother hurried them inside. "Your people built all of this?" Sam asked. "Over many centuries," Wren said. "This city is called Deeproot, and it is the largest settlement left. There used to be others, spread throughout the caverns, but the hollows swallowed them one by one, and the survivors came here. This is the last city of the root folk." That hit Sam harder than anything else he had heard. The idea that this beautiful, glowing city, full of life and craft and history, was the last one. The final stand of an entire people against a darkness that wanted to erase them from existence. He looked at Wren and saw the weight of that truth in her eyes, the quiet exhaustion of someone who had been fighting a losing battle for a very long time. "We will fix this," Sam said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. Wren looked at him, and this time she did not almost smile. She actually smiled, a real one, that lit up her silver eyes and made her look like a completely different person. "Maybe you are braver than you think," she said. "Or maybe I am just too stubborn to be scared," Sam replied. They finished gathering their supplies and returned to Wren's house, as the crystals above began to dim toward their version of night. Sam sat on the floor and looked at the map spread out before him, tracing the route with his finger. Up through the broken door to the surface, find the Heartstone, charge it with sunlight, come back down, and then travel deep into the earth, to the source of the hollow. It was a long road, and the map showed that the path through the deep caverns was full of places marked with symbols that Wren explained meant danger, unstable ground, underground rivers, narrow passages, and worst of all, areas where the hollow's influence was strongest. "Are you scared?" Wren asked him. Sam thought about lying, but something about Wren made him want to be honest. "Yes," he said, "very scared." "Good," she said. "Scared people are careful, and careful people stay alive." She handed him a blanket and pointed to the small room at the back. "Tomorrow we go up to find the Heartstone, and after that we go down into the dark, and you will want every bit of rest you can get." Sam took the blanket and went to his room, and this time, despite everything, he fell asleep almost immediately, dreaming of rabbits and glowing cities, and a darkness that whispered his name from somewhere far below. The surface world hit Sam like a wall of sensation when he climbed out through the broken door the next morning. The cold October air on his face, the smell of wet earth and fallen leaves, the gray sky above the treetops, the distant sound of birds calling to each other across the canopy. After a full day underground in the blue crystal light, even this dull gray English morning felt overwhelmingly bright and alive, and he stood at the edge of the clearing, blinking and breathing deep, and feeling the wind move through his hair like the fingers of an old friend. Wren climbed out behind him and immediately froze. She stood completely still in the middle of the clearing, with her eyes wide and her mouth slightly open, turning her head slowly from side to side, like someone trying to take in more than her senses could handle. She lifted one hand and touched a low-hanging branch, running her fingers along the bark, and when a leaf drifted down and landed on her shoulder, she picked it up and held it to her nose and breathed in. "You have never been to the surface before?" Sam asked, though he already knew the answer. "No one has in 200 years, she whispered. "The elders told stories about it, about the sky and the wind and the colors, but I thought they were exaggerating." She looked up through the branches at the gray clouds above, and Sam saw tears in her silver eyes. "It's just a cloudy day," he said gently. You should see it when the sun comes out. Wren wiped her eyes quickly and straightened her shoulders, and just like that, she was the serious, sharp-eyed warrior again. We need to find the Heartstone before midday, she said. The guide will show us the way, if the old stories are correct. Sam looked around the clearing, searching for the brown rabbit. But there was nothing. Just trees and roots and dead leaves and silence. Maybe it is not coming, he started to say, but then he saw it. Not the rabbit, something else entirely. A trail of light, faint and golden, winding along the forest floor between the roots of the great oaks. As if someone had spilled a thin stream of honey that glowed, it led away from the clearing and into the deeper part of the forest, curving out of sight between the trees. Do you see that? Sam asked. See what? Sam pointed at the golden trail, but Wren just frowned and shook her head. There is nothing there, she said. Sam stared at the light, which was as clear to him as the trees themselves, and he understood. This was meant for him alone. The forest was speaking to him in a language only he could hear, showing him a path only he could see. Follow me, he said, and he started walking. The golden trail wound deep into Witchwood, leading Sam through parts of the forest he had never explored before. Past a stream where the water ran clear over smooth black stones, through a grove of silver birches so thick it was like walking through a curtain of white trunks, and up a steep hillside covered in ferns that were brown and crisp with autumn. Wren followed without question, trusting him completely, and Sam felt the weight of that trust like a warm hand on his back, pushing him forward. After about an hour of walking, the golden trail ended at the base of the oldest tree Sam had ever seen. It was an oak, but it was so enormous that it seemed to belong to a different world entirely. Its trunk was wider than Sam's house. Its bark was gray and deeply grooved, like the face of an ancient giant. Roots spread out in every direction like a network of roads, thick as a grown man's body, half buried in the earth and half exposed to the air. And there, nestled in a hollow between two of the largest roots, was the Heartstone. Sam knew it the moment he saw it. It was about the size of his fist, perfectly round and smooth, and it was made of a crystal that looked like frozen water. It was completely clear, with just a faint shimmer inside, like sunlight trapped in ice. And when Sam picked it up, it felt warm in his hands, alive, pulsing with a gentle rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. This is it, he said, and Wren drew a sharp breath when she saw it. A real Heartstone, she whispered. I never thought I would see one. My grandmother told me about them, but I always thought they were just legends. Sam turned the crystal over in his hands, feeling its warmth, and then he looked up at the sky. The clouds were thick and gray, covering the sun completely, and Elder Cade and said the Heartstone needed direct sunlight at midday to absorb enough light to destroy the hollow. We have a problem, Sam said. There is no sun. Wren looked up at the sky and her face fell. How long until midday? She asked. Sam did not have a watch, but based on how long they had been walking and the position of the dull gray glow behind the clouds, he guessed they had about an hour. Maybe the clouds will clear, he said, but even as he said it, he could see more clouds rolling in from the west, dark and heavy with rain. They waited. Wren sat on one of the great roots, and Sam stood holding the Heartstone, watching the sky with growing desperation. The minutes crawled by, and the clouds only got thicker, and Sam felt a cold knot of panic forming in his stomach. It is not going to clear in time, Wren said quietly. Sam squeezed the Heartstone in his hands and closed his eyes, trying to think. He thought about the golden trail that had led him here, about the rabbit that had led him to the door, about Elder Cade saying that he carried memories of sunlight inside him. Memories of sunlight. Sam opened his eyes. What if I don't need the sun? He said. Wren looked at him, confused. Elder Cade said I carry the memory of sunlight. real sunlight, from the surface world. What if the Heartstone does not need the actual sun? What if it just needs the light that is already inside me? That is not how the old stories describe it. The old stories are 200 years old, Sam said. Maybe they got some of the details wrong. Or maybe things have changed. But I can feel something when I hold this stone. I can feel it pulling at something inside me, like it is asking for something. And I think I know what it wants. Sam closed his eyes again and held the Heartstone against his chest. And he thought about sunlight. Not in a vague, dreamy way, but with fierce, sharp concentration. He thought about specific moments of sunlight in his life. The way the morning sun came through his bedroom window and made a warm rectangle on his blanket. The way the light looked in the forest on a summer afternoon, gold and green and dancing with shadows. The way the sun felt on the back of his neck when he sat on the hill behind his house, watching the clouds. The blinding, bright flash when the sun came out after a rainstorm, and everything was wet and sparkling. He poured these memories into the stone like water into a cup, and he felt the Heartstone respond. It grew warmer and warmer in his hands, and behind his closed eyelids he could see a light building, bright and golden, and the warmth spread from his hands, up his arms, and into his chest, until he felt like he was standing in the middle of a summer day. Wren gasped. Sam opened his eyes and looked down at the Heartstone, and it was blazing with golden light, not the faint shimmer it had before, but a deep radiant glow that pushed back the gray dimness of the cloudy forest and turned everything around them warm and bright. The leaves on the ground gleamed copper and gold. The tree bark shone like polished silver, and Sam's own hands were lit up as if he was holding a piece of the sun itself. "You did it," Wren breathed, shielding her eyes with her hand. Sam stared at the glowing stone in wonder. He could feel the light inside it, warm and steady and strong, and he could feel that it was connected to something inside him. Not just his memories, but something deeper, something that was part of who he was. "We need to go," Wren said, snapping back to practicality. "The longer we wait, the stronger the hollow gets, and once you take that light underground, the hollow will feel it and come for us." They ran back through the forest, following the path they had taken, and Sam held the Heartstone carefully against his chest, covering it with his jacket to dim the glow. Even through the fabric, it shone like a lantern, and small forest creatures stopped to watch them pass, drawn by the strange golden light moving through the gray autumn woods. When they reached the clearing and the open door in the ground, Sam paused at the top of the stone staircase and looked back at the forest, at the trees swaying in the wind, at the gray sky, at the last brown leaves clinging to the branches, and he felt a sudden wave of fear about going back down into the dark. "What if it is not enough?" he said. "What if the hollow is too strong?" Wren stood beside him and looked out at the forest, and then she looked at him. "Do you remember what I said last night? That scared people are careful, and careful people stay alive." "Yes," he responded. "Well, I also believe something else," she said. "I believe that sometimes being brave does not mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing the thing anyway because it matters." She put her hand on his arm and squeezed. "And this matters more than anything." Sam nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped down into the darkness. The Heartstone glowed through his jacket like a captured star as they descended the stone steps, and the warm light pushed against the cold blue dimness of the underground world. They moved through the tunnel quickly, passing through the cavern where Deeproot glowed below them, and instead of going down to the city, they took a different path, a narrow passage that branched off to the left and led downward at a steep angle, into tunnels that Wren said no one had used in years. The air grew colder. The crystal light on the walls grew dimmer and then disappeared entirely, replaced by bare dark stone that seemed to swallow the light from the Heartstone. And as they went deeper, Sam began to feel something, a pressure in his mind, subtle at first, but growing stronger with every step, like a hand slowly closing around his thoughts. "It knows we are here," Ren whispered. The hollow was reaching for them. Sam tightened his grip on the Heartstone and kept walking, one step at a time, deeper and deeper into the dark. The tunnel narrowed until Sam had to turn sideways to fit through, the rough stones scraping against his chest and back, and the Heartstone pressed between his body and the rock face glowed fiercely, throwing wild shadows across the passage. Ren moved ahead of him like a cat, slipping through gaps that seemed too small for a person, her silver eyes catching the golden light and reflecting it back like tiny mirrors. The pressure in Sam's mind was getting worse. It had started as a vague unease, a heaviness behind his eyes, but now it was becoming something else. Thoughts that were not his own, sliding into his head like cold water seeping through cracks in a wall. "You are going to fail," the thoughts whispered. "You are just a boy, a small, ordinary, frightened boy from a village where nothing happens. And you think you can fight something that has existed for centuries, something that has swallowed cities and broken warriors and devoured light itself." Sam gritted his teeth and pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the warmth of the Heartstone against his chest. But they kept coming. "Your father does not even know where you are. Your mother will be worried sick. You will never see them again because you will die down here in the dark, and nobody will ever find you." "Sam," Ren's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. She had stopped ahead of him and was looking back with concern. "Are you all right? Your face has gone pale." "The hollow is talking to me," Sam said, "inside my head." Ren's expression hardened. "Do not listen to it. It will say anything to make you stop. It will use your fears, your doubts, your worst thoughts about yourself. Everything you have ever been afraid of, it will throw at you." "How do you know?" "Because it does the same thing to us," she said quietly. "Every day, all the time, whispering at the edges of our minds. The root folk have lived with those whispers for 200 years, and it is one of the reasons we are so tired." Sam looked at her and felt a surge of something that was bigger than fear. It was anger. Anger at this thing that had tormented an entire people for centuries, that had stolen their world piece by piece, that had made Ren grow up fighting a battle she never should have had to fight. He grabbed the Heartstone and held it out in front of him, and its golden light blazed brighter, as if it felt his anger, pushing back the darkness in the tunnel. "Keep going," he said. They descended for what felt like hours. The tunnels twisted and turned, sometimes opening into small caverns, where the walls were slick with black moisture and strange formations hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and sometimes narrowing into cracks so tight that Sam had to breathe out completely to squeeze through. And then the tunnels changed. The stone became darker, not just in color but in feeling, as if the rock itself was sick. It was spongy and cold to the touch, and when Sam looked closely, he could see thin veins of pure black running through it like infected blood vessels. The air tasted wrong, bitter and metallic and empty, as though something essential had been removed from it. "We are in the Hollow's territory now," Ren said, and her voice was barely audible. The whispers in Sam's mind grew louder, more insistent, and they changed from words into something worse. Images. He saw his mother sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, crying. He saw his father searching the forest, calling Sam's name, voice hoarse and desperate. He saw Fernhill empty and gray, the trees dead, the houses crumbling, everything gone. "You caused this," the hollow whispered. "You opened the door and let me out, and everything you love will be destroyed because of you." Tears burned in Sam's eyes, and his hands shook, and for one terrible moment he considered stopping. just sitting down on the cold dark floor and giving up. Letting the heartstone go dark. Letting the hollow win. Because maybe the voice was right. Maybe this was all his fault, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. But then Ren reached back and took his hand. Her fingers were cold and thin, but her grip was strong, and the contact shocked Sam back to himself. He looked at her and saw that she was crying too, silent tears running down her pale cheeks, and he realized that the hollow was attacking her as well, showing her the worst things it could find inside her mind. And yet she was still moving forward, still holding his hand, still fighting. If she could keep going, so could he. Together, Ren said. Together, Sam repeated. They walked the last stretch side by side, hand in hand, and the tunnel opened suddenly into a vast underground space, the largest cavern Sam had seen, so enormous that the Heartstone's golden light could not reach the walls or ceiling. It was like standing at the edge of an infinite black void, and at the center of that void was the source of the hollow. Sam had expected a monster, a creature, something with a shape he could understand. But it was none of those things. It was an absence. A place where nothing existed. Not light, not air, not sound, not thought. Just pure absolute emptiness that pulled at everything around it, like a wound in the fabric of the world. It was darker than dark, a blackness so deep that looking at it felt like falling, and Sam had to tear his eyes away before it sucked him in. The Heartstone trembled in his hand, and its golden light flickered. "This is it," Ren said. "You have to release the light, all of it, all at once. Pour everything you have into the Heartstone, and let it go." The hollow's whispers became a roar, a deafening screaming inside Sam's skull that made his knees buckle and his vision blur. He felt the darkness pressing against him from all sides, heavy and suffocating, trying to crush the light in his hands, trying to snuff out the warmth in his chest, trying to reach inside him and extinguish every memory of sunlight he had ever held. He fell to his knees, clutching the Heartstone to his chest, and the light dimmed further, flickering like a candle in a storm. "You are nothing," the hollow screamed. "You are a speck of light in an ocean of darkness, and I will swallow you whole." Sam closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he found his memories. Not the ones the hollow had shown him. Those were lies, twisted versions of the truth, designed to break him. But the real ones, the ones that lived in the deepest part of his heart. He remembered his mother laughing in the kitchen on a Sunday morning, flour on her hands, sunlight streaming through the window behind her. He remembered his father lifting him onto his shoulders at the village fair when he was small enough to see the whole world from up there. He remembered lying in the grass behind his house on a summer evening, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to pink to purple. He remembered the forest, his forest, the way the light came through the leaves like stained glass, the way the rain sounded on the canopy, the way the air smelled after a storm, clean and new and full of life. He remembered Ren's smile, the real one, the one that lit up her silver eyes, and Elder Cade's dry laugh, and the children in the square tossing their glowing ball, and the impossible upward-flowing fountain, and the gardens full of plants that shone like jewels. He remembered the beauty of both worlds, the surface and the underground, and he understood something that the hollow could never understand, because the hollow was emptiness and could not comprehend fullness. The world was full of light and sound and color and warmth and people who loved each other, and forests that grew toward the sky, and crystals that glowed in the dark, and rivers that ran through underground cities, and children who laughed, and rabbits that appeared on paths. Needed them most. And all of that, every single beautiful, fragile, extraordinary piece of it, was worth fighting for. Sam opened his eyes, lifted the Heartstone above his head, and let go of everything inside him. The light that erupted from the crystal was not golden anymore. It was white, pure blinding white, the color of the sun at its zenith, and it exploded outward in every direction like a wave, filling the cavern from floor to ceiling, reaching into every crack and corner and shadow. The hollow screamed. Not in Sam's mind this time, but out loud. A sound that was like nothing he had ever heard. A sound of pure anguish and rage. The sound of absolute darkness meeting absolute light for the first time in centuries. The white light hit the void at the center of the cavern, and the void resisted, pushing back, fighting, writhing like a living thing caught in a trap. But the light was stronger, fed by every memory of warmth and love and life that Sam had ever held, and it poured into the emptiness and filled it the way water fills a hole in the sand. The darkness cracked. Great fissures of light spread across its surface, and through the cracks, Sam could see something underneath. Not more darkness, but stone, ordinary stone, the bones of the earth that had been hidden beneath the hollow shadow for 200 years. The emptiness shattered. It broke apart like black glass, and dissolved into nothing, and the light rushed in to fill the space it left behind. And suddenly, the cavern was not dark anymore. It was alive with golden light that pulsed and flowed like liquid, running along the walls and ceiling, lighting up crystal formations that had been hidden in the dark. And the whole underground world seemed to take a deep, shuddering breath as the weight of centuries of shadow was lifted from its shoulders. Sam dropped to his knees, the heartstone dark and cool in his hands, completely drained, and he was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. Ren caught him before he fell. "You did it," she said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, holding him up with both arms. "Sam, you did it. It is gone. The hollow is gone." Sam managed a weak smile. "I just need a nap," he whispered, and then everything went dark. Not the terrible dark of the hollow, but the warm, comfortable dark of deep, earned, dreamless sleep. He woke up in Deeproot, in the small room at the back of Ren's house, and the first thing he noticed was the light. The crystals overhead were brighter than he had ever seen them. Not blue anymore, but golden, real golden, like sunlight. And when he stumbled out of the room, he found Ren and Elder Cade waiting for him at the low table, with cups of that terrible root tea and smiles on their faces. "How long was I asleep?" Sam asked. 2 days, Ren said. Elder Cade reached across the table and placed his weathered hand on Sam's arm. "The hollow is gone," the old man said. "Truly gone, not pushed back, not contained, but destroyed. The deep caverns are clean, the tunnels are open, and the roots of the great trees are already growing deeper, reaching down to reconnect with us. In time, the old bond between our worlds will be restored." "And the door?" Sam asked. "Will remain open," Cade said. "We will not close ourselves off again. The great closing was born from fear, and fear was always the hollow's greatest weapon. From now on, the door stays open, and anyone who needs to pass between our worlds will be welcome." Sam felt something warm spread through his chest, and it was not the Heartstone this time. It was just happiness, plain and simple. He went home that afternoon, climbing the stone steps with Ren beside him, and when they emerged into the forest clearing, the sun was shining, actually shining, breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, and the whole forest was lit up with golden autumn light that made everything glow. Ren stood in the clearing with her face turned up to the sky, and the sunlight made her silver eyes shine like diamonds, and Sam thought that she looked like someone who was seeing the world for the very first time. Because she was. "It is even more beautiful than you said," she whispered. Sam walked her back through the forest to the edge of the village, and they stood there looking at Fernhill, small and quiet and perfectly ordinary. And Sam realized that he would never see it the same way again. Not because the village had changed, but because he had. "Will you come back?" Wren asked. "Every day," Sam said. And he did. Every afternoon after school, Sam walked into Witchwood, found the clearing with the ancient oaks, climbed down through the door beneath the roots, and entered the world below. He became the bridge between two peoples who had been separated for far too long, carrying stories and gifts and friendship back and forth, like sunlight passed from hand to hand. And sometimes, when the afternoon light was golden and the forest was quiet, he would see a brown rabbit sitting on the path ahead of him, watching him with dark round eyes. And Sam would smile, because he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be.